It's live match time again, and that out there is the new phase 3 at Makins. All the lakes have been redug, restocked. It's proving really popular. There's 30 guys here today on a midweek open, which is, I think, a fantastic turnout. Makins is getting popular, let me tell you. Now, I've just been my pools. I'm hoping for a good draw. Next time you see me is on the bank. Hopefully, we'll catch some fish. 7, peg 18. Just been back to the van for a few dead maggots and a little bit of ground bait. Sean, last week's winner on the next peg. It's a lovely looking lake. Obviously it's a bit bare because it's brand new, but it's going to grow up nicely. I'm on an end peg, wind blowing into it. Apparently it's a good area, we'll see. So I've got the point across there, planning on chucking a little feeder across there. And then I'm trying to keep my match nice and simple. I think a pole line short. Got a couple of rigs set up to cover everything, but I'm hoping it's a simple day on the feeder and then maybe catching a few fish short late on. Let's have a look at what we've got. So we've got our little 9-footer out again. Nice soft rod. It's only a 20-metre chuck, something like that. And then main rig, where is it? Main rig is going to be this beauty. It's a 4x14s, strung bulk, 4-inch hook length of 0.12. Hopefully we can put 0.14 on if we're bagging up later. Four by 14s rube, and that is going to be hopefully the rig for the last half of the match, catching short. No one really knows the stocking of the lake. There's obviously some carp in here. I think they've put a load of skimmers and silvers in here as well. I'm hoping we get plenty of bites. Target weight is probably £70. Plenty of guys here, 30 guys here. Wish me luck. Something I love to do when you're a little bit unsure on how the day's going to pan out is to start short on a pole. That way you're not ruining the whole of your peg by starting on a feeder or starting on the extremes of your swim. So today was no different. I felt corn was the bait. I wanted to pot in corn, big pot corn, not fill in the big pot, just maybe 8 or 10 grains, and just sit over it and see what happens with a single grain of corn. It's not taking me long to get a bite. Obviously beautiful conditions, wind's blowing in. I just felt the pole could be really good here. And often when you get a bite short on the pole, it's sometimes a big fish, one of the bigger fish of the lake. This was no different, an 8-pounder, first drop in on the pole, you know, over the moon. The problem with today's session was Sean was absolutely slaying him on a feeder. I just couldn't keep up. I was struggling to present a rig on the pole, and I just knew there was enough fish feeding to make feeder a viable option. So out comes the feeder rod, and it wasn't long. Once again, we've got a fish. I've been chucking a little tiny hybrid feeder, maybe half a metre short of the island, just to give myself a little bit of fresh water to go into if I feel I needed to. But half a metre short of the island, single maggot on a size 16, tips gone round, no indications at all leading up to the bite, which was interesting. I thought with these new fish you'd get loads of little liners and indications, but nothing at all. 3 minutes, it'd been in the water, tips gone round, we've got a fish on. Not as big as the first fish I caught on a pole, but a great start. We've had 2 fish now in the first half hour, 40 minutes. Once again, Sean is probably, at this point, £15 ahead. He's catching really steadily on a feeder. I always felt Sean was going to catch a few fish on a feeder. I always feel a nice straight far bank is going to hold some fish, and I was always scared that the fish might drift round the corner. I could push them away from where I was casting to if I was to cast to them too early. But it looks like with the perfect weather conditions, the fish, they were just going to stay there all day. the first half of the match was fantastic fishing. I'd cast out that little hybrid feeder, tiny bit of ground bait in amongst the pellets, single maggot on the hook. We'd be sitting there waiting for maybe 3 to 5 minutes. I'd actually stop watching the cast each time so I'd get a feel for how long the bites were taking to come. And between 3 and 5 minutes, we'd get a bite nearly every single chug. The tip would toe round, or, as was the case a lot today, we'd get a lot of dropbacks. So obviously the fish running towards us, picking up the feeder, running towards us. I always like to strike, reasonably firmly when I'm method feeder fishing. Something I always like to do. I always like to set the hook initially, and also, especially on a drop back, you've got to catch up with the fish straight away. It means that you're going to lose less fish by setting that hook as fast as possible. There were plenty of other anglers on the lake catching fish, especially on our side of the lake. There's 5 anglers dotted around to my right hand side, and it all looked like they were catching reasonably steady. Everyone seemed to have something about their own peg. So some people had pegs that are wider than others, which maybe would hold fish later on in the session. Some people had more room than others, so obviously margins would come into play, or maybe a short pole line later on in the day. And other people had a really good feeder chuck as well. So I think the way the lake's been designed has been really good. It means that everyone's got something about their peg that's a little bit unique. As it turned out, me and Sean were having a right good battle. It was nip and tuck all the way through the match, and every time I felt that I was just edging ahead, Sean would respond with, I felt there were much bigger fish than what I was catching. Sean, he openly admitted he wasn't great with his clicker. He kept telling me that he'd hold up a fish and he'd call it £5. I'd look at it and think, that's got to be 7. So we knew that it was ever so close. I felt that Sean was ahead of me, although Sean felt that I was ahead of him. That's how close it was. A really good battle though, and I just hope that my extra space and maybe a pole line later on would come into play and hopefully kick me ahead of him. As the match has gone on, we've heard that the other lake in for today, Avon, that's not fishing as well as the lake we're on. So it was looking like the winner of our lake would win the day. And looking around, there's probably 3-4 anglers in contention. Me, Sean, there was another couple of anglers maybe that were catching their margins by this time. But I always felt that if I could stay ahead of Sean, I've got a really good chance of winning the match. And as we went into the last hour and a half, Sean's feeder line died and mine just kept ticking over all the time. Interestingly, the wind was making casting the feeder really difficult, and it was really hard to get it in the same place twice. But I'm not too sure that on the day that actually mattered. The fish didn't seem to be stacking up. It was taking a long while for a bite, so it wasn't as if you were chucking right on that same spot. The fish were ravenous. I felt casting around, as long as you were in that shallow water, was actually a good thing. And later in the session, as Sean slowed down, I realised that more and more fish were maybe moving along the point to my left-hand side, and I'd cast slightly more to the left and hopefully ambush a few fish as they came around that point. And it seemed to be working really well. A lot of the fish that we were catching, they weren't the new stockies, they were fish from other lakes. So what the fishery team have done is they've moved a lot of fish around with this new lake rebuilding that they've done. And in Severn Lake, it seems that a lot of the fish in that lake tend to be the older fish from the other lakes. So a lot of the fish were averaging 3, 4, 5 pound, that sort of weight. Whereas I think on the other lakes, the fish were a lot smaller. So you're looking at £1, £1.5 fish as an average size. So it was good to build a weight a lot faster. And also, what surprised me was these fish were really difficult to catch when we were fishing for them in the other lakes. They were really tough to catch with the lakes in that old design. So putting more fish in a lake obviously spurs the fish into feeding, but also maybe the design of the lake has helped those fish feed a little bit more confidently as well. Now, going into the last hour, Sean's had a couple of fish on the pole, and also my feed line was really dying. And I just felt that the pole could play a part here. The wind was beautiful. The fish should be short. I'm on a corner peg. I was expecting big things from this pole line. And I've fed it on and off throughout the day. I've upped the feed as the day's gone on, so I was ready to drop on it for the last hour. I've dropped on it. I've had a fish pretty quickly. But the tow was a nightmare. just couldn't present the rig how I wanted to present it. So I'd feed my bait, I'd hold that rig as still as possible. I ended up fishing a really short line between pole tip and float just to keep the float in the same spot, but the tow was going left, it was going right, it was in at me, out from me. It was almost like the corner that I was in had become a little bit of a washing machine with the extra strong wind that we've had today. And this is where my biggest mistake of the match comes. I spent way too long trying to make the pole line work. I had an amazing day on the feeder, but because it had slowed slightly, I thought the grass was green on the other side and we were going to catch loads of fish on the pole. I was totally wrong. It was just too hard to control the rig, too hard to get your feeding right and read the swim. And although odd person was catching on the pole, no one was really setting the world alight. And what I should have done is sit on that feeder, set up one rod, sit on that feeder, and don't get tempted off it. You know, take the rough with the smooth and have good spells and bad spells throughout the day. So eventually, after finally realising my mistake, I've put the pole down and I've just spent the last half hour on the feeder and it's been fantastic. I've had another 5 fish in the last half hour. That single maggot, bit of ground bait, some pellets in the hybrid feeder, that has been the way to go. I always feel with that size fish, those 3-4 pound fish, those older fish, maybe their mouths are not fully intact, a single maggot goes straight in. And it's been a proven winner for a lot of method feeder anglers on smaller venues over the years. I think it's a fantastic way of fishing. Come the end of the match, I did feel, if I'm honest, I felt like I was ahead of Sean, maybe £10 ahead of him, because he just slowed up on the pole line. The anglers to his right, a few of them had caught on the pole, but Sean again, I think because he was being affected by the same sort of issues with the tow that I was having, the fish just wouldn't settle on that pole line. Too difficult to present your rig, too difficult to feed the peg. The fish probably weren't settled in that stronger tow, and in our corner, it just wasn't right for the pole. What a wonderful day, £139 for the match win. Great to get a win. Obviously, some good guys fishing as well today, so a good result that is. Now, just to show you, I was on an absolutely brilliant peg. Sean to my right, he finished second. Steve Hayward opposite me, he finished third. And then I think fourth place was to my right in the far corner. He caught a lot of fish in his margins, he did. So show some fish are starting to feed in that shallow water. Like I say, Makins, I think, is on the up. It's showing great signs of becoming a really popular fishery again. Loads of fish in the lakes. The other lake was won with just over £50, but that was a lot of fish, over 50 fish, I think. So it just shows the stocking policy is working. I'm looking forward to visiting there again. Now, if you guys like this sort of format, please think about subscribing. That way you won't miss out on any or more videos. Until next time, folks, tight lines.